Hello, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us for the Wealth Growth Club today. We've got a really interesting topic for debate today, which is basically around thinking of buying a property. How can I negotiate to win? Okay, and these are the points that we're going to be discussing as a part of today's session. And please do feel free to interject in the chat. If you type something to YouTube or Facebook or whatever platform you're on at the moment, I should see those aggregated in the feed, and I will do my best to try and answer those for you live, if at all possible. So let's, without further ado, get started. And the topic of today's point, the first topic of today's point, is really how do I find those hidden gems in my property search? Well, the first thing is have a good drive round and explore the emerging neighbourhoods. Decide which ones you feel are upcoming and which ones are perhaps on the decline. And that's fairly easy to tell because in reality, if you were to look back over the history, what activity has been going on the local area, how's crime affecting the locality, are properties in generally a good state of repair, are there really desirable schools out there, etc. So very much look at the neighbourhoods. What are those which are coming to the fore, where you may particularly want to live? It doesn't necessarily have to be right up there. The big thing is to actually try and ride the trend, as it were. And a good way of doing that is also to use portals such as Zoopla, Rightmove, and also On the Market. And you can set up alerts. So create your own criterion there, set up alerts, and you'll get notified of every new instruction that comes on and also any price reductions. And you'll very quickly start to get a feel for the locations and which are the ones you potentially want to live in. And also speak to some local estate agents. It's very important. They will give you a bit of a feel for it. If you found a property you like, have a little bit of a discussion with them about it. And attend some open houses. If you're wanting a little bit of a bargain and you're prepared to do a bit of work, you could also attend an auction. But typically those properties, it's a case of, a buyer beware. Obviously, there can be lots of pitfalls for that. And it's also about trying to look for off-market listings. Now, that's not as easy as it sounds, because in real terms, the reason they're off-market is that typically the house seller has asked them not to be listed on the market, or it may just be it's not ready to go on the market. Now, if it's the latter of the two, then you're in with a chance, especially if you're in a very strong position. So now, basically, what I would also appreciate today as well is if you're enjoying the content, please press the like button. Also, subscribe if you're enjoying it, and that way you'll be notified of new videos as they come through and new live sessions. Now, in terms of today's session, what we plan to cover as part of the next point is why is a property market review important? Well, for example, there is a lot of unofficial data out there which isn't necessarily immediately available, but if you know where to look, you can gain access to it. So, for example, Land Registry makes a lot of information available. And if you go on to do a Google search for Land Registry, you could do some searches on there and you can find out a lot more about the local areas, what prices properties being sold at. But you'll also get a good idea, again, going back to the platforms, because you can actually filter those in most cases where they've been sold subject to contract or where they've recently gone under offer. So you'll start to get a sense of property values. Okay. Also look at some of the risks. So, for example, is your new house you're considering built on a floodplain? Now, you might think these days that wouldn't be the case, or there might be quite a well-recognized history of that. Now, it may well be only in some severe case of flooding that property might flood every 50 or 100 years. But what you don't want to be is a victim of that. And of course, there is more of a tendency for flooding with the effects of global warming, etc. And try and use data to help you in making these better decisions. Try and get a feel for neighborhood dynamics. So if you like a particular area, if you've got a dog, for example, take your dog out for a little bit of a walk. You'll be surprised how many people you meet locally, and just get a feel. That's what we did very recently. We took our dog out, went to different locations, went for lots of walks, and you meet lots of people in the locality, and that gives you not only a really nice feel of where it's a nice place to live, but also you quite often get people to open up and tell you, what their thoughts are of any particular area. Also look at your budgets and make sure you plan appropriately. And in terms of if you want individual help, I've personally got access to a massive resource library. And should you be interested in finding out a bit more about a particular property, if you get directly in touch, I can produce a report for you, which is about 20-25 pages deep, which can be sent through as a PDF. So do feel free to tap me on that, and I'll do my best to try and help. And just message me after today's session. Now, in terms of the next point that we plan to cover, that's really about doing property search again. And when you go to see a property, just look out for any obvious telltale signs. So if the property hasn't been well maintained, it's probably much easier to spot because you might see some signs of damp or some cracks. Now, obviously, it's quite normal to get hairline cracks, but if the cracks are much more structural, look out for those. Look at the past history of the property and previous sales. Now, again, this information is publicly available. You can typically see what they sold for previously. And if you're not sure, certainly, again, I would be able to help you with that. If you found a property that you like, then obviously pay for a professional valuation. And there's really three types there. You can either have a standard property valuation, which is really done more for mortgage purposes. You can have what's classed as a home buyer's report, which is close to a structural survey, but it only notes the main points. And again, that's fed back also to your mortgage company. So if the property is downvalued, you just got to be mindful of that. Or you could pay for a full structural survey. And you might think, well, actually, why would I want to do that? But it does really put you in the best position to negotiate. Also look at local council plans, see what building might be going on in the local area. Is there anything that's going to go up perhaps near you, which may have an impact? And look at other changes which go on. For example, in the London area, you've had the introduction of ULEZ, which is basically saying that if you drive anything other than a very modern car or perhaps an electric car, then you're going to be paying an extra charge in addition to the congestion charge. And I think there's about 10 cities throughout the UK which have adopted some form of congestion charging. And look at also the condition of nearby properties. Are the properties near where you want to live? Are they well maintained? Or does the area give a feeling of being generally run down? The other thing to do with this as well is always try and buy in the best area you can. So, for example, if there's a change or turn in the property market and prices start to go very stagnant or start to go downwards, it's always the lower cost areas which get hit first. And that can mean that you also get stuck where you basically can't sell. And that's a situation which you don't want to find yourself in. If it's a better area, you tend to find that, yes, prices might be stagnant for a little bit, but they may not be so inclined to go down. And you may well be able to still sell your property in a not very good market, simply because you're living in a very desirable area. Now, around that point as well, you need to try and avoid properties as well, which have got less than 85 years on a lease, and also generally try and avoid flats or apartments in high-rise blocks. On the face of it, especially if it's a new build, it can be very attractive because the costs look very low. But what you'll find is the costs in the first 5 or 6 years will go up astronomically, and you'll also potentially be competing with other people who may want to sell, and you could end up in a situation where perhaps your circumstances change and you're trapped in a home which actually is not really right for you at this new time. So therefore, where possible, also try and find properties which have got either parking spaces or space for a car, because even if you don't need it, invariably when you come to sell the property, that tends to make it much more desirable. And that sort of moving really on to the next point which is how can you find properties which have the greatest potential for maximum gain. Um, Focus on sort of high growth suburbs, up and coming suburbs, but also look at upcoming infrastructure projects. So, for example, if you're moving into possibly moving into a town where there's going to be a new shopping centre that's going to be built, not right on your doorstep, but perhaps a couple of miles away, or it might be there's some new transport links coming in, which again are not going to directly affect you in terms of being too close to any construction, then you will tend to find that perhaps when those works are finished, there'll be quite a marked increase in the value of the properties in those areas. And it also can make the areas much more desirable to live in. But the thing is trying to do that early enough, because in reality, if that's been known about for a little while, you'll find already quite a bit of the capital growth has already been built into the prices of the properties in that locality. Also look at schools, look at Ofsted reports. Being close to a good school or within good catchment areas makes a massive difference to property values, because people move into those areas or try and strive to move to those areas to get their kids in there. And even if you don't have dependent children at the moment, that may be very relevant for you later on if you should come to sell. Okay, and look at what other properties are being up there and what's happened to them in terms of what you should be doing next. Now, really, the next part really is to do with negotiating the best price. And again, this goes back to extensive market research. So again, I can help you with the issuing of those reports, which can be used for negotiation. And again, that also where the survey on your property is particularly important, because invariably a surveyor will be more conservative in their valuation of the property, and that will help you in your negotiation. Now, of course, you may not want to pay for a survey until your offer's been accepted. Okay, and the property might be priced in such a way it factors in the condition. But if it turns out on from seeing the property inspection that actually it doesn't, if there's a number of unexpected challenges with the property, then that does give you an opportunity to renegotiate. Now, I'm not suggesting you do this routinely, because we should all have a sense of ethics about these things. But by the same token, if you're not happy with the outcome of those discussions, be prepared to walk away. So it's therefore important when you make an offer on a property, do your homework first, make sure it's well researched. When we acquire property, invariably it's not just a financial decision, but it tends to be a very big emotional decision, especially if you're getting looking to buy a property with a partner, or you may have got children. Then the property has to feel right, and it's very difficult to pinpoint what that is, because what is right for you isn't necessarily right for someone else, and equally the other way around. If the property has got certain flaws, for example, it might be near a very busy road, or there's some construction works going on next door, or there's some local planning issues, use those flaws as leverage in your discussions. And there are nice ways of doing this, and there are also not so nice ways of doing it. If you do things the right way, and you can keep the seller of the property on side when you're about to make the offer, then that's a good thing. But remember, they're also emotional human beings, and they want to feel valued. So to them, if they've lived on the property for 20 or 30 years, they may be very proud of it, even though it might need extensive work. So it's always important to make sure that you take into account the other person's feelings in those discussions as well. And that is where a good estate agent or a buyer's agent comes in. And just on this whole area about buyer's agents as well, because a number of you have probably seen the program Location, Location, Location with Phil and Kirsty. That's been one of the most long-running shows, and you'll notice there that traditionally estate agents are acting for the vendor or for the seller. So therefore, it's in their interest to get the best price for the seller. In fact, they've got a responsibility to negotiate on the seller's behalf. Really, what you want when you're buying a property is to have someone that represents you as the buyer. And that's actually what I specialize in. So if you're familiar with what Phil and Kirsty talk about, that's exactly what I do. And this is why I can actually help you with that process. So bear in mind as well, you have to watch conflicts of interest. Now, it's illegal for an agent to act for the buyer and the seller at the same time. Okay, so so you have to be mindful of that. Most estate agents are aware of that, and they won't cross that line. But sometimes there is some blurring on it. But just remember, out of all the estate agents, they're acting typically for the seller. Okay, so and also just factor in as well that because the agent is acting for the seller, they may not disclose all the issues related to the property. Now, there are some obligations on disclosure, but they may rather rely on you trying to find those issues out. So it's important to avoid a scenario where you're over-risking or over-leveraging yourself on a property purchase. And just make sure you have an open mind in terms of market options as well, because invariably there are lots of other choices, and it's about finding the right property. So I think broadly speaking, we've actually covered all the salient points. As I say, if you've got any questions, just do type them in the chat. I'll do my best to help. And so those are the points we've covered today. And what I plan to do now is to very quickly go over with you what we're planning to discuss next week. Now, this is looking at things from a bit of a different angle. We're going to be looking at the trials and tribulations of buying your dream home. So we discuss, and we're going to see whether we can get a few guests on next week as well, who can also share their experiences. So we'll be looking at mortgage challenges and how to get around them, what to do when you get a problem survey and down valuations. We'll be looking at title and geological problems relating to a property. Conveyancing can be an area where you have a lot of challenges, actually. You wouldn't think so, but bear in mind, solicitors aren't really incentivized to speed up the sales process or purchase process. And quite often there is a bit of a weak link there. And this is where, as well, is important when you do negotiate a price with your agent, that you also find out the situation of the chain, because you don't want to make an offer on something and then find you're going to be let down later on. And then we'll be discussing as well this whole aspect around gazumping and gazundering. Okay, because gazundering, you may not have heard that term before, but actually that also is known to happen in situations with chains or a very either fast-moving market or a slow-moving market as well. So we'll be discussing how you can deal with all those challenges. And then sort of moving on a little bit now, we're pretty well at the end. There are my contact details there, and obviously you've got the URLs for finding us online. This is being recorded, so you will find it on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. It should also be on Twitter as well. So do feel free to engage and reach out, and I will only be too pleased to help you. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining in today. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't hit that like button or subscribe button, I certainly would really appreciate it. And look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks then. Cheers. Bye.